A very good morning to all of you boys and girls out there. My name is Miss Mpho Lukele. I'm from Sasolburg and I'm from the Fezile DBE Education District. Today we'll be going through paper 3 and just some basics, remind you what's important, what to look at and what not to look at for tomorrow's paper. I hope those who are writing life sciences today enjoyed their paper, and hopefully you'll also enjoy tomorrow's paper. All right, I think we can start. I have a short presentation here, PowerPoint presentation for you, and it's basically general instructions and just guidelines to help you with how to prepare for paper 3. Now, the first slide is basically your general information. You all know that the structure of the paper consists of 3 sections, and that would be section A, it's your essays, section B, your longer transsectional form, and section C would be your shorter transsectional. The total marks is 100, and remember that this is the paper that carries most marks. It's 100 marks written in 2.5 hours. That's a lot of time if you manage your time correctly. Now, mark allocation. Your section A consists of 50 marks. Your section B has 30 marks, and section C carries 30 marks. That all totals 200 marks. It's very important that you manage your time thus. If you manage to spend 80 minutes in section A, which carries 50 marks, to do your planning, your mind map, whatever planning you have, your first draft and your final piece, that would be a great achievement. The rest, the remaining parts would be easier for you to go through. Then you can spend 40 minutes in section B and 30 minutes in section C. Now, these are the basic instructions. A lot of you do not read the instructions properly, and that is why you do not do well in your paper 3. I'd love to emphasize that paper 3 carries most marks, and these are marks not to be thrown away. We can all score with these marks. Now, the first one. You have to start each section on a new page. That is a given. I think it's the third instruction in your question paper, but you have to start each section on a new page. Planning for each section should be on a new page, and you start with the final piece on a new page. Do not start directly underneath the planning for that section. And for each section, you have to plan, edit, and proofread. A lot of learners only plan and edit for section A. They don't plan for section B or section C. It is very important that each section should have its own plan and editing, and there should be evidence that you have proofread what you have written. However, note that most markers have a problem with learners who use a pencil for cancelling out or for making corrections. As long as it can be evident in your final piece that you have proofread, that's all they need. You don't have to write in incorrect spelling deliberately so that you can correct yourself at a later stage. That's not the skill they are looking for. Remember that when you write, you are writing for the next person to come and read what you have written. So if what you have written is very concise and reader-friendly, then the next person will definitely be able to see that you have proofread. You have to stick to the numbering system used in the question paper. Do not create your own Roman figure system, numbering system, or alphabetical numbering system. It has to be the numbering system used in the question paper. Now, I know that this might come as a joke to you, but a lot of you just assume that if you have written 1.5 pages, then it's maybe 250 words. But you have to make sure that if you do not stick to the numbering, to the word count given in terms of pages, then you have to stick to the word count. You have to literally count the number of words that you have used. So it is important for you to to indicate the correct word count. And lastly, like I said, when you write, you are writing for the next person to read what you have written. So your handwriting has to be neat and legible at all times. Now, mark allocation. Yes, like I've already outlined that your essays carry 50 marks, but you have to note that content and planning in essays carry more marks than language criterion. So when we mark your work, we look at your content and whether planning has halted the final piece in any way. Does planning enable you to produce the desired piece of writing at the end of the day, or is there evidence somewhere in your essay that due to poor planning you could not produce good final piece? So your content and planning carry most marks. But with transactional pieces, it's content, planning, and format. So format is very important. If you're not sure about the format of the transactional piece, do not even choose it. Just make sure that you understand exactly what is required of you before you choose that piece. So what does this mean? You can write a very beautiful essay or a very beautiful letter and not adhere to the correct format if it's a letter. This means you'll be penalized and you'll lose a lot of marks. So language is not necessarily the key criterion we look at when we award marks. For instance, if your essay, the topic that you have chosen, has been misinterpreted in some way, then it means you'll also forfeit marks. So at the end of the day, what really counts is the comprehension and the interpretation of the topics. That is what is important. Now let's get started with creative writing. Remember that creative writing is something that is creative, it's personal. There is no rule for us to measure how creative you are, because creativity comes in different forms. So what does this mean? As much as there is no way for us to measure the level of creativity, but you have to bear in mind that there are guidelines that have to be used to make sure that what you have written is standardized. That's basically what it means. Now, when you start writing, especially for your essays, make sure that you appeal to all senses. Like, if you're writing about food, mention how they tasted. If you had, if you were to write a descriptive essay about the most beautiful person you have ever seen, then you have to be very visual in your descriptions. What did you hear if you're writing about something that you had, depending on the topic, but try by all means to use all the 5 senses that a human have. Well, if you want to include the 6th one, it would also be a bonus, which is the sense of humor, of course. Now, all these sensory clusterings are very important because they enhance your writing. They give it more substance. Now, let's look at the following. I have 3 pictures here, but I'll show you 1 picture at a time. I just want to give you 3 minutes to look at this picture and try to come up with your own topic. I have there a day at the beach, but believe me, there are many topics you can come up with from the given topic. A day at the beach is the topic that I have given myself. Now I needed to come up with at least 3 different topics for this picture. So I'll give you roughly 2.5 minutes to come up with, let's say 5 different topics. You may start. All right. Now, I'm sure you have come up with 1,000 of beautiful topics for this picture. Before I show you the next 2 pictures, I just want to show you what I have come up with. For example, you could say, my family. That would be suitable for the picture that I've shown you. Marine climate meaning like weather that is experienced by cities or places near the sea. That would also be suitable. Happy days, that would be suitable as well. Summer, or all of the above 4 topics are very happy topics on the brighter side. Or it could be something negative, something on the other side of the coin. The day I lost my friend. Now, remember, when you look at a topic, you don't always have to go for the obvious. Try to be very original and very different from what anybody else would have tried to come up with. Now, let's look at the other pictures and come back to my topics and say if this could have still been suitable, whether any of the given topics could have still been suitable. There is a picture. Look at your topics and try to tell me if what you see in front of you somehow goes with what you have jotted down. There is a picture. Now let's look at the topics again. My family, to some extent. Marine climate, yes, again. This one, to some extent. Happy days, most definitely. Summer, true. And the day I lost a friend, that's also suitable. Now let's look at the next picture. My family. There is the next picture, and let's look at the topics. My family, a definite no. Marine climate, yes, not so obvious, but yes, we can see that's an ocean. Happy days, okay, to some extent. Summer, true. The day I lost my friend, no. So I just want to show you this. All of the above pictures all have one thing in common. It's a day at the beach, a day at the beach, a day at the beach. But all three pictures can be interpreted differently by different people. As much as they all have one thing in common, but the interpretations would lie with the beholder. As much as what you see in this picture could be 1,000 of other interpretations. I could be seeing a group of children playing together who are afraid to go into the, who are just playing on the beach and afraid to go into the water. But you could also see two young lifesavers trying to, or actually approaching the water. So it could be any other story around there. So what you see in the picture is basically, it goes back to when we say what one sees lies with the one who's looking at the picture. And this one is very plain for what is a wave. But we are likely to presume that it's at the beach because the topic says a day at the beach. So that's basically how topics can be interpreted. But remember, with visual topics, anything goes, and how you interpret the topic is entirely up to you, depending on the topic you have given yourself. The interpretation would then, lie with how you structure your essay as a whole. Now, those were the images. Remember, when you structure these essays, the ones where you have responded to visual images or the visual topics, you have to use figurative language. It is very important that you use figurative language. The examples that I came up with could be when you use simile. She looked like a goddess. That's a beautiful comparison drawn between this female person and a goddess. But it carries a lot more weight because we are already thinking along the lines of, a goddess when we look at this person. The metaphor, the restless child was a real monkey in the class. I'm sure there's no such from the classes where you are sitting in right now. And personification, the flames lit hungrily at the wooden house. So whatever you do, just try to be original and do not go for the obvious. Remember, cliches are not really creative because they've been overused to an extent that they've lost their meaning. So phrases like as cold as ice or red as blood should be avoided as much as possible. Now, I have come up, or rather, yes, we have come up with this, these three words to help you when you write your essays, or just for creative writing. It is important to use strong verbs. Strong verbs enhance the quality of writing, and it gives more substance than just using ordinary verbs. Remember, when the person who reads your essay comes across those, they are convinced that you have a variety of words to choose from within your vocabulary. A matured vocabulary counts in your favor. Now, images. Try to create images. As I read what you have written, I should be able to picture what you are talking about. I should actually be in that moment. I should feel what you have written about. Give as much details as you can. It is important that you don't, okay, you can leave some of the details to my imagination, but the basic, the necessary details should be given. You know, you have to give as much detail as you can. And if you can, if you have experienced what you are writing about, it's even a bonus. Then you are able to say, you know, you have a lot more to write about because you've been through the experience yourself. And the ending, I'd always say try not to give an obvious ending. Let it be, you know, you should keep me curious. How is this piece of writing going to end? Will it end, you know, the ordinary way? Will it have just a normal ending, or will it be something that really, really reminds me that I once read an essay that was entitled "A Day at the Beach," or whatever the topic will be? And if you can apply the following to your sentences, then your sentences will be much, much better constructed. Fine. Another example. I need you to use strong verbs, to use images, to give details, to add your personal experience or any experience. It can be a friend's experience or an experience of somebody close to you, something that you have had, and an ending to this sentence. So it should not just be as bare as it is. I need you to give it some clothing, and, you know, by adding strong verbs, images, details, experience, and ending to this sentence. So I'll just give you, I think, about a minute. Yeah, a minute should be enough. Okay, he saw her. Let's quickly look at this. Now you could have come up with anything, but now I tried to just come up with something very plain. The tall, handsome guy wearing a black suit, all that would be referring to he. Now, can you see that you have already given me a picture of who this he character is, what he was wearing, and what he looked like. Now, so, instead of just saying so, you say looked deeply into the eyes of. Now, from there, that should be her, a young girl sitting in the corner, and made her feel like a timid mouse. Now, instead of just saying he saw her, you're saying the tall, handsome guy wearing a black suit looked deeply into the eyes of a young girl sitting in the corner and made her feel like a timid mouse. There are many ways you could have interpreted this. There are many ways you could have added the strong verbs and the images, gave it details and an experience, and added an ending. But remember, when you construct your sentences, yes, we do not encourage you to use long sentences. However, we do encourage that you may vary the structures of sentences. So if you were to start with a simple sentence, do not just include a whole lot of simple sentences throughout the essay. Make sure that you vary the structures, you vary the types of sentences you use. You can move from a simple sentence to a compound sentence and then come back to a complex and a simple again, you know, whichever way you may love to, but make sure that you use a number of different structures of sentences. Likewise with sentence types. Not every sentence should be, you know, a statement. Some of them should be commands. Some of them should be instructions. You know, you can use any other type of a sentence. Now, common errors that most learners commit when they write. You would find that you have an idea. You have heard the sentence before, or you have heard of this expression from somewhere, but you never made it a point that you check out the words used in that expression in a dictionary. This is where common errors come from. Words which sound the same but which have different meanings. You would say my whole life, and that changes the meaning. It actually doesn't make sense at all. Your life with holes, your life had holes, your whole life, what exactly does that mean? Concord. These, some of them is just, it's not even an error. It's a mistake, because sometimes you don't know when to use what, but in most of the time it's an error, because you know exactly when to use have and when to use have. So these are just careless mistakes that you guys would be making. Like, I is happy today. You can never say I is, and you know that, but because you are writing in a hurry and you never take time to go back and check your work, that results in these careless mistakes. And tenses, make sure that if you choose to write a narrative essay, then you stick to the tense, to past tense, because you are telling us something that happened. So your tense should be uniform throughout the piece of writing. Tenses are very important because they carry meaning. They help convey meaning much easier. Now let's go to section A finally. When you choose a topic, always make sure that you are very careful. Now, make sure that you go through 2 or 3 topics, and then before you choose a topic, you should be able to say, okay, with topic 1, I can write, I have 4 facts. With topic 4, I have 7 facts. With topic 3, I only have 1 fact. Therefore, I'll go with topic 4 because I have a lot more information to talk about then. And you should eliminate the obvious ideas and develop original and creative ideas. Like I said earlier, do not go for the obvious choice. Try to come up with something different, something that would be unique to your writing, something that would remind the marker that, wow, this learner really, really interpreted this differently. And when you start writing, when you're given a topic, always ask yourself these 5 questions. We call them the WH questions. It's who was involved, who was there, who is talking, what is happening, what is being said about the main speaker, what is happening to to this character, when, and when could be anything. It could be anything from time to day to year to season, anything. Where? Was it in the house? Was it in the bedroom? Was it in Bloemfontein? Was it in the Free State? Where? And how did it happen? It was midnight and I was afraid. That would be for an example. Now let's look at this picture and tell me how you would apply the WH questions. There is a picture. Remember, the 5 questions you have to ask are who, what, when, where, and how. And if I've given you the topic, it was midnight and I was afraid. There is a picture. You have to be able to say who was afraid. Yes, we are told that it was midnight, that's time given, but what season was it? Was it cold? Was it warm? You have to appeal, remember, to all 5 senses of human. Here's another picture. It was midnight and I was afraid. Who, what, when, where, and how. If you can start by creating an essay from that angle, you'll have a lot to write about. And this is the last picture. The topic is still, it was midnight and I was afraid. Right, I'm sure you've managed to come up with a few ideas there. Now, when we say where, you have to be very precise about the setting. Give as much detail as you can. Add the sides. Remember the 5 words that I gave you, SIDES? Add the sides to the setting. And who? Was it your friend? Was it your mother? Or was it yourself? Who was involved? What was happening? Was it a party held at midnight? Or were you held hostage by the burglars? What was happening? Always think what the others will write about and then move away from that. This is my utmost, it's very important. If you can always think about what everybody will think about and try to move away from that, then that's where you will be original and different. That's what creativity is about. For example, if everybody will look at those pictures, let me just go back to the pictures. If anybody who looks at these pictures and comes up with the same topic, it was midnight and I was afraid. It was midnight and I was afraid. Then you should try to come up with something very different. For example, my babysitter, or the beautiful sounds created by the night. Something that will be very unique. Now, if we look at that, at the three pictures that I've just shown you above, everybody would say, okay, it was midnight and I was alone. I was alone at night because it was midnight, of course, and the babysitter was not there. We had some noise outside and I started becoming afraid, and then people just broke into our house. I tried to reach for the cricket bat, but I couldn't. Fortunately, somebody had called the police and they were at our doorstep within 5 minutes, and the reward was given to the person who had called the police. If everybody will go along those lines, try to think of something different so that you can be original. The story that I've just given you is not at all original. Now, you could, for example, rather set the story during the Second World War. Well, if you are a well-read person, you would know what happened in the Second World War. Of course, most of us were not there, but we know what happened because we read. Now, change the age and position of the narrator from your own into somebody else's. That gives you even more details because you are standing from a central point. You can look exactly at what is happening and you are able to report back to us that as he turned around the corner, there was somebody waiting for him. The way you tell us how the story happened, if you are not in the moment, you are telling us how it happened, you have a lot more to write about. You can even describe the scene, tell us how he felt. He looked so afraid that anybody, even a rat could smell his fear, something like that. Now, here would be my last example with regard to that before we go for a short break. My worst day at school. Usually, you would talk about your homework was not done and there was a nasty learner to you and the teacher wanted to punish you for no reason, but that would be the obvious story. Why not talk about, take it from a perspective of a grade 1 learner and on her first day at school. Something very different, something that we hardly think about. Not from a grade 12 learner's perspective, because most of the grade 12 learners will try to look at it from that angle. We are 5 minutes away from taking a break, so I'll just try to briefly sum up what I wanted to say for the first session. Be original, but do not digress from the topic. Yes, you should always be you should not be out of the context. Now, just to sum up what I've talked about, it is important that you use comparisons. You can use similes, you can use metaphors, you can use personification. It's up to you. But having used comparisons gives the reader a brighter picture of what you are talking about. It paints a brighter picture. These images should not be meaningless. They must be original and creative. A picture, they should be able to create a picture in the minds of the reader. To make the picture more vivid, now similes and metaphors are used as well as personifications, and a good image will appeal to your senses, emotions, and intellect. Now, we are just going to adjourn for a short break. We'll be back in 10 minutes' time. Welcome back. Hope you had a refreshed break. Now, these are some of the things you have to avoid when you start writing. A very small handwriting might be a problem because not everybody will be able to read what you have written. Remember, all along you were writing for your teacher who's used to you, who knows that learner A writes like this, learner B writes like this. But the people who will be marking you at the end of the day do not even know, they cannot attach a face to a handwriting, and they will not even be able to come back to you and ask you to rewrite what you have written. So you definitely have to be able to write legibly, which was one of the points I mentioned earlier. You must avoid fancy characters like capital letters within a word. Like new styles of writing certain letters, so you must write standard handwriting. And your personal pronoun I should always be written in a capital letter, and you cannot use letter U instead of you. And we've come across this phrase in a formal essay. I know that is unbelievable. See you later, I think, got to go. I don't even have to know what this means, but you may not use SMS language. This cannot be overemphasized. Now, very important, correctional fluids or correcting fluids are not allowed, exam room. So corrections should not be done with correction fluids, and a word cannot be crossed out and be corrected with a pencil or with a different colored pen. Now, you may not use contractions, words like don't, can't, I've, you, and cause, though that is informal. You cannot use that in formal writing. And beginning a sentence with a gerund like walking to school is one of my favorite habits. No, you have to use a formal, full sentence that is well structured. Incorrect breaking of a letter at the end of a sentence. For example, if you're trying to write people and you just put letter P there and you go to the next one, you have to break words into their syllables. These are some of the careless errors we come across. There instead of there. It's with an apostrophe instead of it's without an apostrophe. And words where my father is represented by a pronoun she, or my sister, he, that is not correct. You also have to bear in mind that when you choose a topic, you have to be very sure that you understand each and every word. You understand exactly what the topic expects of you. For example, if you don't really, if you are not a strong learner, you don't have good marks for English, then it is safer for you to choose a narrative composition or any topic that expects you to tell a story. Now, you can write a story in the past tense, which is much simple, just simple past tense, which is the easiest to use rather than the present, because the chances of writing something fresh and different are much better. Do not choose a topic unless you are absolutely certain what it means. Abstract or philosophical topics such as daydreams or loneliness require time and maturity of thought. So if you are not yet there, stay safe and choose straightforward topics that would be easily interpreted. If you're an expert in a certain field, for example, let's say global warming, if you have a lot of information and you know what global warming is, and you can be in a better position to explain global warming to the audience or to whoever who will be reading your essay, then you can choose that topic. Only if you know, if you are an expert in that field. Otherwise, stay away from it. You should always keep to the topic. Be short and brief, keep to the topic. Once you have chosen a topic, do not digress from it. If you do, you will lose marks. You should always be, what you write should not be out of context. It should be within. If the topic, for example, is a mad, sad Saturday, then you have to make reference to both the Saturday being mad and being sad. You cannot just focus on the mad side of the day, but you also have to focus on the sad side of the day. So remember, I will always emphasize this. Be different, be original. That is what creativity is all about. Your composition should be well structured. Length is very important. If you're asked to write an essay of 1.5 pages long, then that's what you have to do. It's 1 page to 1.5 pages long. If maybe that's the length you are given, then you have to stick to that. Work neatly and legibly at all times. Remember, if for some reason you are not able to write the final piece and you have only started with the first draft, then the first draft will be marked as the final piece because you could not produce the final piece. So for this reason, you definitely have to work neatly and legibly, because the one that you intended to be the first draft will now be the one that earns you marks. So it has to be neat and legible. Your composition should be proofread. That cannot be overemphasized. Editing and proofreading is part of planning. Now, let's come to introductions. Your introduction has to be catchy. Why? Your introduction is very important. It's an opening paragraph. Remember, it's like we are watching a concert and let's say a celebrity will be performing. So the one who opens the show for us is very important. He sets the tone or breaks it. So your introduction would either set the tone or break it. So you don't want to break it. You want to put it up there. So introductions are the most important part of an essay because this is the first impression that the examiner has of your work. Now, let's look at the topic, the Karoo, and just imagine that you are given this picture and you are asked to entitle the picture the Karoo. If you've never been to the Karoo, it might be a bit tricky for you, but nevertheless, by just looking at the picture, you can then have an idea of what the Karoo looks like. For example, a vast expanse of scorched sand, small bushes, trees covered by dust. That's an idea of what the Karoo is about. A dome of rich blue governed by the fierce ball of fire, then dipping slowly downwards to meet the sand on the horizon. The Karoo, the sky, the sun. This is basically what I'm referring to. You could have different words to interpret this. You could talk about the 3 layers that you see, the earth, the mirage between the earth and the sky and the sky. You could talk about the vegetation. You could talk about the soil itself, that as sandy and dull as it looks, but it's able to hold some of the beautiful trees that you can see there. You can also see that picture, that it's a desert place, but there are trees there. And that's the driest. Now, this is very characteristic of the Karoo. So whatever you want to talk about from the three pictures, if you are given the topic, the Karoo, you already have an idea. Now, let's look at these introductions. Shining water captures the sun in a silver mirror, taming it with soft coolness. Water, life. Maybe my topic there would be the waterless life in the Karoo. Ship wander around trying to escape the clutching hands of the merciless sun. Dry mouths searching among bushes. Bushes struggling to exist covered by dust. Quiet, an oppressive stillness. A car winds along the road. Its white paint is coated by a film of dust. Now, conclusion is as important as an introduction. This, in a concert, would be the closing scene. Remember, most of us prefer to go the normal route or the obvious route where you have, your middle is followed by a happy ending. But that is not always the case. But no matter what the case is, your conclusion is as important as the introduction. This is the last part that the examiner reads before they give you marks. So last impression lasts. Now your conclusion should also be planned. As much as your introduction should be planned, so should your conclusion. Do not have any abstract ending. Let it be clear and very vivid. Do not end with a rhetorical question. That's out of the question. And you should not have an open-ended ending. Take your stand. Be sure that this is what I want to do. Now we'll just look roughly at the 5 types of essays. I want us to start with an argumentative essay. The word itself suggests that you have to forward your arguments. You are required to agree the case of to argue the case of your topic. You can either agree or you can disagree with what is given. In other words, you have to debate your opinion about the topic given by presenting a winning argument one way or the other. Whichever argument you choose should be the one that wins, even if you don't agree. But if the side that you have chosen has more facts, then you have to convince the reader that this is what is important. This side is more important than the other one. The argumentative essay topics are stated in a way that you are able to pick a side. For example, in business, people are more important than profits. This is very controversial because not everybody believes that. There are people who believe that profits are more important than people in any business type. Now, do you agree or do you disagree? Why do you believe so? Or why should I agree with you? So for all those reasons, then you start stating your arguments that yes, people are more important than profits because people are human beings, blah, blah, blah. Or no, profits are more important than people because profits is, the sole reason for people to venture into business is to make profits. So you will have your side and you have to maintain it. It is important to remember that you can't agree and disagree unless you are given a discursive essay where you have been told to give both sides of the topic. In an argumentative essay, you have to pick one side and argue it. You cannot present both sides. Once you have picked your side, you need to lay out the why part logically and persuasively. Persuasive there is very important. You have to be as persuasive as you can. Remember, it's like a debate on paper and you have to win. That's why you write an argumentative essay. You have to use the most compelling reasons possible to convince me to your point of view. I did not want to come up with possible topics for the essay types. We might run out of time, and I still have other parts to go through. Now, the second one would be the descriptive essay. It's also self-explanatory. You have to describe something or someone or a certain event, but it has to be descriptive in nature. It can be something concrete, like an object or a place, or it can even be something abstract, like an emotion or a memory, or even an imagination. You know, you can describe your imagination. The purpose is to make the reader see what you see, or feel what you felt, or taste what you tasted. Remember the 5 senses that we talked about? Or hear what you had, the way you had it, you know, how it felt when you had it, and so on. It must seem as real as it seemed when you felt it. The only way to achieve this is to describe it in a way that is easily understandable. Yes, you have to use as many adjectives as you can, but try not to use, you know, adjectives describing the same thing, like she was a beautiful, pretty person. No, try not, you cannot do that. Both pretty and beautiful refer to this young girl, so you cannot. But you have to be as real. You have to make the description as real and live as you can. Ask yourself questions about what you are describing so that you understand and engage with it fully. You can use figurative language. In other words, compare it to something that may be more evocative, like, she looked scared. Then you can say, instead of saying she looked scared, you'd say, she looked like a terrified deer paralyzed by a terrifying snarl of a predator. That's more, you know, it gives it more flesh. Use adjectives and adverbs. By just saying the book, you say the well-read book with the green cover. Now, the third one, which is discursive essay, which is also argumentative in nature, is where we argue both points of the view. You argue both sides of the viewpoint. While an argumentative essay argues a point of view only, remember, in an argumentative you may only choose one side, but with a discursive essay you are told to look into both sides of the argument. It's a discussion of the topic that is an attempt to really understand it holistically. You look at both the advantages and the disadvantages of the topic, or whatever that is given. It's not about pushing your opinion or your agenda, but it's about really exposing the given topic. Now, having said that, after examining the topic from all possible angles and considering the facts, you still need to come to a conclusion. Remember, at the end of the day, you have shown me that, yes, this topic has these 3 advantages and these 3 disadvantages, but at the end of the day, you have to narrow it down to a central or final opinion, which is very personal. Now, when you look at a discursive essay topic, you need to ask yourself, do I want to agree or disagree as much as I'll be looking at both pros and cons? But what exactly are the facts? What will someone else think? Then you can be able to narrow it down to your personal view. Now, the very popular essay type is your narrative essay. The purpose of this essay is to tell a story. Yes, you just narrate a story or an incident. The features are to focus on one incident, and all the action should be centered around the most important incident, you know, the focus of the story. Everything else that happens should be linked to the center of the story, which is the main incident. It should have strong storyline with a beginning, the middle, and the end. And usually it should be told in the simple past tense. It must have a striking introduction. Remember, your introductions are as important as your conclusions, but in this case, your introduction should grab the reader's attention and keep them curious, and want to find out what happened next, what then, how did he achieve this. But at the end, your conclusion must round off the essay so that we have an overall rounded view of what happened. Now, reflective essays are not as popular as the descriptive, the narrative, and the argumentative essays. In a reflective essay, you reflect on the topic, but in most cases you reflect upon things that have happened in your life. You reflect on personal experiences. For example, have I personally experienced what the topic is talking about? How did it affect me? And how does it continue to affect me? You look back on your experiences for inspiration, and that will earn you more facts. Please note that even though a reflective essay is a personal response to a topic, there must still be a logic to your essay. And the reflective essay should reflect on a personal experience and the lessons learned from it. You must look beyond the surface to the deeper meaning of life. Don't just say, I was a drunkard and I stopped drinking because my uncle told me that drinking had dire consequences and I'm now living a good life. You should go deeper. Make sure that even if I was going through that, I'm able to learn a lesson from your story. Now, let's go through writing prompts. Suppose you are stranded on a remote island with no hope of being rescued. You only have a pen, a bottle, and one piece of paper. Well, you'd love to be rescued, but not only that. If you're not able to be rescued, you'd love to let people know what happened to you, who you are, and how you'd love to be remembered. Phew. And suppose you found yourself in that room. You have the same stationery, you have a piece of paper and a pen, and you just have to write something about that moment. What comes to your mind? Do you see loneliness because there's one piece of couch in that room? Or do you see dirt because the room itself looks filthy? Or can you look beyond the negative aspects of the picture and see hope? That as much as I was stranded without furniture, at least I had a couch to sit on during the day and sleep on at night. And there would be the other one. Now, let's come to section B, which is your transactional writing. Remember, it would be different with home language because they have section B being subdivided. Both have, they do no longer have longer and shorter transactional. But with us, it's still longer transactional and shorter. But we'll be treating transactional writing for both sections B and C under the same category. Now, we did not always have grammar in the olden days. So people, wanted us to come up with rules regarding writing and composition of poetry and so on. So this is what that the Canterbury Tales wrote, and this actually gave a reason for people to say, you know what, we need some grammar in this life. Now, this is supposed to read like, in a summer season, when soft was the sun, I killed a young bird and I ate it on a bun. Most of the time when examiners mark your work, they feel the same way. They feel that you were not taught any grammar, you were not given any rules whatsoever regarding the use of language or construction of sentences and paragraphs to produce a beautiful essay. They just feel that you need to be taught enough grammar to be able to write sentences that are understandable. So please, if you feel the same way, if you feel that what the poet wrote here is totally nonsensical, this is how some of the assessors feel when they assess your work. Now let's start with the friendly letter. As much as a lot of you are not familiar with friendly letter because you hardly write it, it is important that we go through the structure of the friendly letter because it's still being examined. Now, for exam purposes, you know how to write the friendly letter in this way. For example, you are asked to write a friendly letter to your mother and ask her for pocket money. You want to go on a excursion, school excursion. It's an educational trip and you'd love to go with your schoolmates on that trip. So, as much as it's a friendly letter, yes, you can use formal, informal, relaxed language. However, it doesn't mean that you have to opt for SMS language or what you call Facebook language. The tone is informal and familiar, but we don't use slang. So words like wanna, gonna are not acceptable. Make sure that the format of your letter is correct at all times. If you decide to write a letter, then you should be very sure, because a letter is one of the most popular transactional pieces, but which are poorly answered by learners. So if you choose to answer a letter, please make sure that you have the correct format. Remember, content, format, and planning carry more marks than language in this section. You should avoid introductions like, sorry, I just want to tell you, blah, blah, blah. Thank you for your previous letter. I'm so bored, so I decided to write to you. Please, if you are so bored to write to your friend, the person reading the letter will also be bored. How goes it? I am good. And that's the type of language you use. Now, when you write a friendly letter, your introduction must be striking. You start with the topic immediately. If you're asked to write about an exciting experience, start sharing the experiences that you went through. The body should definitely do that. It deals with the topic. Each paragraph must convey a particular idea on its own. And the second last paragraph is important because it shows interest in person or people you are writing to, and it should read like a letter and not a composition. You should give my regards and not send my regards. And for a friendly letter, you can either say yours sincerely or your friend Tabo or so-and-so. You do not use love, quotes, or with love, Miriam. Or you never include your initials like K, like where you say these are my initials and my surname. Not necessarily. In the business world, who you are is represented by the appearance and quality of your work. So it is very important that what you present in a business letter should be good or of good quality. If you incorrectly format a business letter, what does that say about you? To get a business letter wrong is inexcusable, So this is one transactional format that must be memorized. Style must be formal. That's the first one. For example, we use formal language, we avoid contractions and short forms, and you make sure that all your sentences are structured in such a way that the tone sounds formal. The register, the language used, and so on, everything must be formal. And you must have a topic line. Usually, most learners underline or write their topic lines in capital letters. It is up to you, whether it's underlined or written in capital letters. You must remember the address and inside address. You must always be addressed to someone. So the letter that you write, if you're writing to the school, it would be addressed to the head of the school, who is the principal. If you're writing to the magazine, and it would be the editor who received that. And it must be clear, straightforward, and directly phrased. Avoid phrases like, please be advised that, blah, blah, blah. Thanking you in advance, I hereby. Please run away from that word, especially hereby. Most learners tend to use it incorrectly or out of context. Every business letter has 6 basic parts, which are the heading, the inside address, the salutation, the topic line, which I indicated earlier that it can either be underlined or capitalized, the body, and the closing, which would be yours faithfully or so on. Your letter should be concise and to the point. You must use cautious language. Give only relevant information. And especially if it's an application letter, it should be convincing that you are the correct candidate. Avoid slang and colloquial language at all times. Be logical and use correct punctuation. No colons needed after dear. Contractions you can never use because we've already talked about using formal language. This letter should include a source of advertisement, age and qualifications, experience as required, further characteristics or qualities, references or referees, and appropriate closing. For example, establish and maintain good rapport. Remember, even though you have not yet been, qualified post-matric and are still under 18 and so on, but you have to be creative and come up with, ideas. Just try to be very creative. Language is important in applications. If you are interviewed for a job as an aeroplane pilot and your prospective employer asks you if you have any experience and you answer, I love this. Well, I ain't never actually flied no actual airplanes or nothing, but I got several pilot style heads and several friends who I like to talk about airplanes with. You are definitely not going to get the job. If you answer this way, the prospective employer will immediately realize that you have ended your sentence with a preposition. So you will not get the job. Now, a letter of complaint. You express your views clearly. Give as much information as you can. Avoid emotional language. Never use unjust accusations. Respond directly to the issue. Be constructive. Provide or suggest a solution at the end. Remember, you cannot just point out problems, but you also have to suggest solutions. Now, I will not go through this due to time. Letter to the editor. You should evoke interest and be topical. You should capture attention on the given topic and the introduction. Interesting and thought-provoking. It is based on criticism and expression, and it is derived from personal observation, not necessarily fact, It expresses views clearly with no biasness, and you should never be petty, pompous, or arrogant or threatening. Editor can do nothing. They just take your suggestions or what you have talked about in the letter, but they cannot at the end of the day do anything about it. When you write a speech, you have to decide whether you want it to be an informative speech, a persuasive speech, or an entertaining speech. So your speech should not be dull. Any topic can be appealing if the speaker is truly interested and can convey that to the audience. You have to identify your audience. Know whether you'll be presenting the speech to a group of grade 1 learners or to a group of grade 12 learners. The audience is very important. Determine your main idea. Unless we act now, the rhinos may soon perish. Anorexia nervosa is a growing health problem amongst teen girls. You have to be able to identify the main idea, and that will keep you and your ideas unified, and that is key to your entire speech. This is the basic outline of the letter to the editor. You'll have on top there the editor and with the address underneath, and the body would state the problem, give more details, suggest possible solutions, and you will not be threatening to the editor. I will just quickly skip this. There is your and the format of your diary. You always have to indicate the day, the date, and the year. For example, Wednesday, the 12th of August in 2014. It must be intimate and immediate, not events that happened ages ago. And you refer to people who are close to you as though you were addressing them, not like my mother did this and this. You just say mother did this and this. And it must be very recent. Now, I just want to go to the last line of this. There is a difference between a dialogue and an interview. And the difference is that the interview is a question and response technique, whereas a dialogue is a mere conversation between two people. For example, a young girl chatting with her little parrot. Common errors made by learners. Please read instructions carefully. Please choose suitable topics to suit your ability and keep to the required length. Pay attention to the construction of your sentence. Poor punctuation may hinder the meaning of your sentences. Be careful when you use direct speech in compositions. They must be used appropriately. Candidates who have a serious problem with breaking up of words, we've already talked about that. Candidates make careless concord errors like people is, friends has, and the use of incorrect pronouns. This is just to sum up what I've already talked about. Personal pronoun I should always be written with capital letters. You may not use SMS language. Use capital letters only at the beginning of a sentence. Candidates should always keep to the topic. Now, some of the questions that have always been asked, just to sum up. Do I have to study for paper 3? If you look at the comic strip indicated there, it's two groups of learners and the other one says, I don't really think I should study for my maths test. I prefer the element of surprise. So please eliminate the element of surprise and prepare for your third paper. You might not necessarily sit down and study, but you definitely have to prepare. Go through your previous essays, go through your classwork books or whatever that you have done with your teacher, and just prepare for that. And I've also been asked, what does it take to score good marks in paper 3? You definitely have to understand the topic that you are choosing and interpret it correctly. That will earn you good marks.
I always say good marks will not make you pass or anything, but it will definitely help you. Just special acknowledgements to Mr. Frederick Kramer, and thank you to all.